It began innocuously enough. Greg had just moved into an old Victorian-style house on the outskirts of a small New England town. The kind of house that seemed charming in the daylight, yet whispered of unease as the sun dipped behind the trees. He had inherited it from a distant relative he barely knew, and while the decrepit wallpaper and uneven floorboards were discouraging, the price was impossibly low. Perhaps too low, he thought, but he had rationalized it as a fortunate stroke of luck. The first few nights were uneventful. He spent his evenings unpacking, reading, and occasionally making trips to the local diner for a slice of pie and a cup of coffee. But on the third evening, as a creeping fog rolled off the nearby river, Greg noticed a faint humming. It was soft at first, like someone idly tuning a radio in a distant room. He stopped unpacking and listened, trying to locate the source. The sound seemed almost imperceptible, only distinguishable as an uneven melody, a string of notes that began on one pitch and ended somewhere far from where it had started, as though taunting him. "Probably just the pipes," he muttered to himself. "Old houses have quirks, and this one was bursting with them." But when he returned from the bathroom, he realized the humming had shifted. It emanated from the stairwell, a dark gash in the house that led to the second floor. The sound was now unmistakably human, or at least human-like, but no one lived there besides him. That night, sleep refused to claim him. The shadows in the corners of his room seemed deeper, richer, stretching like black fingers across the walls. He swore he saw movement at the edge of his vision, a figure just a blur, retreating along the hallway when he turned to look. He told himself it was exhaustion, the product of too much caffeine and too many boxes. But deep down, an uneasy seed had been planted that a week passed, and the presence became bolder. It began with small objects moving slightly from their positions, books from the shelf slightly askew, a mug he'd left on the counter now sitting at an odd angle. Then came the sounds, steps in the hall, whispers so soft they seemed to curl into his ears and vanish before he could focus on their meaning. At first, he rationalized each instance. The settling of the house, the wind, a rodent perhaps. But the pattern was too deliberate. One evening, while scrolling through a forum discussing urban legends and haunted houses, he stumbled on a post eerily similar to his experiences. A user in a nearby town had described a shadow in the corner, just waiting, whispering in silence, and strange movements in empty rooms. Greg shivered. The more he read, the more he realized what frightened him most wasn't the shadows or the whispers. It was that these accounts felt intimately familiar, almost like they were describing his own nights, written by someone who had somehow been inside his house with him. Then came the hollow laugh. It was not the laugh of a person, not jovial or warm. It was a dry, rasping sound, like a hollow log cracking under weight, echoing through the old timbers of the house. Greg froze mid-step, staring at the staircase leading to the attic, the source of the sound unknown but undeniably present above him. That night he did not sleep. Days merged into nights, and the entity, or whatever it was, began to assert itself more aggressively. Mirrors in the hallway sometimes reflected empty hallways where he had just been. But other times, in the reflection, he swore he glimpsed a bent, shadowed figure standing behind him, its face concealed, its presence unmistakable. When he turned, the hallmate remained empty. He stopped looking in mirrors, stopped leaving cups of water unattended, stopped trusting his own perception. Greg's friends began noticing changes in him. He wore dark circles under his eyes, spoke less, and smiled even less. He tried to tell them about the house, first in joke, then with trembling urgency as he realized that he couldn't. Words failed him when he tried to describe the weight in the air, the whispers crawling into his mind, repeating secrets he didn't know he had. He imagined scratching at him from inside the walls, eyes that burned into his skull when the lights were off. His friends laughed nervously, attributing his behavior to stress or perhaps an overactive imagination. Yet Greg knew better. This house held something, and it was patient point one night, after hours of listening to the nocturnal cacophony, he traced the sounds to the attic. The ladder screamed against its hinges when he ascended. The air was dense, suffused with a sour, metallic scent he couldn't identify. At the top, the attic sprawled before him, filled with dust, old furniture, and the shadows of things long forgotten. And there it was, a thin, elongated shadow crouched against the furthest wall, its form fluid, stretching and retreating with the movement of some unseen wind. It whispered, low and indecipherable, yet instinctively, he understood its message. Stay. He ran, descending the ladder in terror. Gasping for air he could feel slipping away. Afterward, Greg could no longer ignore the presence. He began recording every incident, notes, audio files, timestamps of strange phenomena. Each recording captured only fragments, soft shuffles, incoherent whispers, objects moving with no explanation, but the cumulative pattern was undeniable. The entity, whatever or whoever it was, thrived on these small acts, weaving anxiety and dread deeper into his life until he felt imprisoned in a home without walls that end desperation. He finally consulted the town's oldest resident, a woman named Mrs. Hawthorne, who claimed to have lived his street for nearly 70 years. She listened quietly, nodding, showing neither surprise nor shock. When he finished recounting his experiences, she simply said, "You're not the first. That house, it doesn't like to be ignored. It wants attention. Shadows need witnesses." The statement chilled him. Witnesses. He understood now. The house reinforced its existence by forcing recognition. To deny it was futile, to flee perhaps dangerous. He realized too late that the house did more than just haunt. It observed, it remembered, and it waited, patient as death. Greg stayed, partially driven by fear, partially by an obsessive need to document. Neighbors began reporting odd noises at night from his window, but found his home perfectly still during the day. Friends stopped visiting. Deliveries went unanswered. Yet within the house, life thrummed. A life he could hear whispering whenever the wind howled through the trees, whenever the chimney moaned, whenever the floorboards groaned in reply. The shadows moved freely, stretching, bending, shifting, intangible yet omnipresent. And sometimes, just before dawn, when he would fall into a rare sleep, he awoke to sitting upright in bed with a whisper against his ear, close enough for him to feel its cold breath. "Do you see me now?" From then on, Greg recorded even his dreams that he never left the house after that. Reflection. The haunting of Greg's life is chilling because it doesn't rely on graphic violence or overt malevolence. Instead, it dwells in persistent unease and creeping psychological terror, blending the familiar with the inexplicable. The way that shadows lengthen just beyond perception and whispers echo in empty rooms. It's the kind of horror that lingers long after the story ends, because it asks a simple, terrifying question. What observes you when you are alone?